women do serve frontline because they have units out there where there are women in it. And again, when you being mobilized to war, it's not a question. It's not like they're going to tell you, okay, you take a back seat and we going ahead of you and we'll be back.
2012 was the hottest year on record in the continental United States, the lower 48. So, again, if people look into it and do the research, it's pretty clear Sandy, as well as many of these other extreme weather events, are very much related to what's happening with our climate and the heating up of the atmosphere.
One of the things that I learned, and I remember thinking this in the newsroom one day, how excited I was that I was going to be working for the Washington Post because it was such a wonderfully liberal organization. But I had not taken into account that it was still run by individuals, some of whom were literally racist.
Alan's work understands the nature, I think, of this society, how the white race and white supremacy have been central in shaping it, how if we can challenge that effectively, we can move in a new direction.
Broadcasting from New York City to the world, it's the G-Man Interviews.
Tristan Bonn graduated from the University of Arizona in 1981 with a Bachelor of Arts degree. In 1985, she attended Creighton University and graduated with a Juris Doctorate. Her education and training concluded at the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs, where she earned a Master of Arts in History in 2000. She has taught both civil and criminal law classes for over 20 years, both on the Front Range of Colorado at various institutions, including the aforementioned University of Colorado at Colorado Springs, Regis University, Buena Vista University in Iowa, and a host of other facilities. She was a senior prosecuting attorney in the Colorado Springs City Attorney's Office for nearly 8 years, and the first police auditor for the city of Omaha for almost 6 years. She joins us from Omaha, Nebraska to discuss what she describes as an ongoing pattern of corruption and abuse of power within the Omaha Police Department. She is calling for a special investigation by the U.S. Justice Department in effort to rein in what she says is a department that's completely out of control. It should be noted that Omaha Mayor Jim Suttle and Chief of Police Todd Schmatter were invited on the show to provide their assessment of the increasingly tense situation between the Omaha Police Department and the community. The officials did not respond. Ms. Bonn, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I read your blog, and it's very clear that you're extremely passionate about the allegations you've made against the Omaha Police Department. However, as difficult as it may be, I would like for you to try and dismiss opinion and passion and simply provide facts so that listeners can draw their own conclusions.
Sure.
Having said that, can you provide us with an overview of your 8-year career as a senior prosecutor?
I performed all the typical functions of a prosecutor and then rose into the management ranks. We had a high-paced, high-volume misdemeanor court primarily. We probably touched 10,000 cases a month, so there were a lot of cases to handle. We had about 12 prosecutors, and in the management team, which consisted of 3 people, we oversaw that department and interacted with all the other departments that you would in a criminal justice system, probation, the police department, obviously, the judges, the clerk's office, that sort of thing. And one of my functions was to be a liaison with the police department. And where I worked in Colorado Springs, it was a very proactive city attorney's office. And so we typically worked hand in hand with our police department if we saw problems either in training, performance, what have you, with our police department. And our prosecutors tried to nip those in the bud before they became bigger issues with the community. And that was one of my primary functions.
How did you end up becoming the first police auditor for the city of Omaha?
Well, I went to law school back here. I'd lived out in Colorado for almost 20 years, but, wanted to get closer to some family. And I was as surprised as anyone to see an advertisement for a police auditor in Omaha, and I was thrilled. I thought, wow, maybe things had really started to change in Omaha. So I applied for the job and surprisingly got it.
As a police auditor, what were some of your primary responsibilities?
Well, the way the ordinance was written, and it was modeled after a similar ordinance in San Jose, California, is there was an outside civilian law enforcement trained expert who would come into the police department and actually shadow the internal affairs investigations. And the purpose was to determine whether or not the investigations were fair. And the function was both to shadow the individual cases and monitor them, but also to audit the collective cases filed by the citizens of the community to determine if there were any trends and patterns of complaint. And then based on your expertise, the auditor was to publish quarterly reports identifying those trends and patterns as well as making recommendations to improve the police service.
How would you describe the reception you received by members of the department?
Awful. Well, I should say, the chief was, nervous. The internal affairs lieutenant worked with me, and so did the internal affairs department. But the rank and file and the union, and I didn't know this because I was out of town right up until the hiring, they had basically conducted a fairly comprehensive campaign to discredit the office really before it even started.
When did you begin to notice patterns of alleged corruption and systemic abuse?
Well, when I got to Omaha, the office was nothing. I literally was handed a box with a couple of pencils and had to set everything up. So part of what I told myself was, I'm going to give it enough time that I can see some sort of baseline. 6 months was kind of my idea. But right away, I was struck by some things that were troubling, how things were processed by the police department. I went right away over to the Internal Affairs Department and I read a year's worth of past internal affairs cases and was just concerned with, the content, what the substance of some of those complaints were. I might add at this point, because many more years have gone by and I see this now in hindsight, but the department I came from, Colorado Springs, was an excellent police department. It was all I knew at the time, so in many ways I thought, gosh, this is how police departments function. And when I came to the OPD, right away there were issues that struck me as items that I would have raised to our police department in Colorado Springs as areas of concern. So that started right away, but it took me a while, probably about a year and a half, to collect up enough data and information to actually start publishing reports about trends and patterns of complaint. But I would add that as soon as I started identifying them, for instance, the traffic stop report, that there were complaints about traffic stops, that evidence became apparent fairly quickly, and it just deepened over the years that I was there.
Your blog lists a number of reports you wrote and filed about the police department and its officers. Are they the same reports you compiled as the police auditor, or were they written and posted as an independent source?
The past reports that are on my blog were actually the reports that I filed while I was auditor. There were about 25 of them.
Between your 5th and 6th year with the department, you were terminated.
Yes.
What did the department officially cite as the reason for termination?
Insubordination.
Could you be a little more specific?
At the end of the 5th year, the city council withdrew the funding for the office, and the office was political football. And so, sort of in response, the mayor said, fine, I'll just put her in the mayor's office. So he moved me, the auditor, into the mayor's office and made it a function of the mayor's office, and basically said, keep doing the same job. However, when I was moved over to the mayor's office, I lost my civil service protection and I became an at-will employee. I was told by the mayor's chief of staff to just keep doing what I had done, but they took away my staff. So I explained to him that I would not be able to do quarterly reports. I would be able to do maybe an annual or a biannual report. Fine, they said, just keep doing what you do. So I took that opportunity to do a more comprehensive report that I could work on that didn't require as much administrative help. That was the traffic report. I corresponded with the chief of staff numerous times about this report, but I will tell you quite frankly, the chief of staff regularly canceled meetings with me, wouldn't get back to me. I rarely, if ever, spoke to the mayor. He hardly ever spoke to me about anything about the auditor's office. And, this troubled me, so I documented everything and sent them a memo that I would be filing this traffic report. In fact, I even outlined parts of the traffic report, and I had a website that I actually posted some memos on about the problems that I was detecting. But unfortunately, and this I think really illustrates how political the office was, neither the mayor nor the chief of staff apparently read anything. So when my report was finally done, I filed it. I sent them one last memo telling them that I was going to be filing a report, and I indicated that I hadn't received any response from anyone about all of the items that I had listed that were of concern, and that the report was not going to be a very positive one. Never heard anything back. I filed the report the same way I always had, which it was a public document. I simply filed it with the city clerk's office, and it became an attachment to the city council agenda. I did that like I had the previous 24 reports, and 6 days later I was fired.
You denounced the department's claims and filed a lawsuit.
I filed a lawsuit against the city for wrongful termination. Under the EEOC, there is a provision for whistleblowers that if you report an employment practice that's unlawful and then a negative action is taken against you, that there's some whistleblowing protection. That was the theory of my lawsuit, and I filed it. The Nebraska EEOC office conducted an 18-month investigation, and they filed a very strong show cause in my favor against the city, indicating that the city had violated the Nebraska equal employment laws, but the city denounced that, and as is their right, they filed in federal court. They denied any settlement. We filed in state court. They removed to federal court. There were 4 claims. 2 claims wound their way through the federal court system, and I was dismissed out without ever having a hearing, and then the last 2 claims were dismissed out in state court without ever having any, court testimony. They were basically dismissed on motions for summary judgment.
The department is citing insubordination, but do you believe it was the fact that you filed these reports or were filing these reports and possibly going to file others that caused them to take action?
Well, the anatomy of a traffic stop report was the most comprehensive, and it was the most, I thought, the best researched, most well documented. There's no question in mind. My mind, it was a political, hatchet job. The mayor fired me because he did not want the criticism of his office or the police department. And since then, I've formulated, not having really any political background or experience, but there's a great deal of support from the unions that runs to the mayor's office. And I believe that the mayor felt that support was going to be jeopardized if I were to continue.
Then why bring in a police auditor? If they're worried about something slipping out to the public or something being detrimental to the office of the mayor or the police department, what's the point in bringing in a police auditor?
Well, it was a very controversial office. Even the formation of the office, that's why I was the first one. They had only just formed the office, and the office was formed at the behest of the community that was very irate. Prior to my arriving here, there had been 2 questionable police-involved shooting of 2 separate traffic stops, both victims, black men, shot and killed in North Omaha. And things were very, very heated. And Omaha has sort of this history of, well, we'll just, placate things will die down, and then we'll, go on without making any real systematic changes. Well, the auditor's office was basically the offering for those incidents. And I believe that the office was really nothing more than that. Now, at the time, of course, me, naive, dumb me, I thought, gosh, I was supposed to do my job. And I did show up and do my job. And I think that was unexpected, quite honestly. And that was also part of the reason I was fired.
I spoke to another Omaha resident on March 29th, who described herself as a white woman in her 60s who witnessed police using excessive force against members of the black community ever since she was 5 years old.
Yes.
I've discovered that many people speaking out on this issue are white, not black.
Yes.
If so many blacks are being abused and violated by members of the Omaha Police Department, why haven't they, or black community leaders in Omaha, spoken out?
Well, they've tried. I will tell you, and I tell everybody this story. When I first got here, I asked the same question. As I say, I came from a very clean city in terms of, government. And it still makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up as people are afraid of retaliation. And, I'm living proof of what they will do to you if you speak out. And there's a cabal downtown, and, which is sort of the power seat. They've been in charge for many years. They're Democrats primarily, and they fancy themselves, liberals, but they completely sell out when it comes to police brutality. And it's really one of the ugly secrets of, I think, a lot of the bad policing that we've seen across the country. And at least in my view, what happens is there's a choice between staying in power, which means you give the union whatever they want, because that's one of your base supports, and your trade-off is police brutality, which primarily impacts minority communities. I have never encountered that in my career till I came here. I find it to be absolutely hideous. And it's also sort of the deep, buried, dysfunctional secret of what happens, I think, in Omaha. So you do get this mix of people, whites that are beyond concerned, are upset about it. And we've had several black leaders attempt to speak out. And we have a famous legislator in North Omaha, Senator Ernie Chambers, who's spoken out. Was the longest-serving legislator in the United States, and he's spoken out for years. We just cannot get outside of the very insular world of Omaha, Nebraska, to get the attention that we need, and I'm not sure why that is. I think it will require outside intervention, outside attention in order to break this silence.
On March 22nd, an incident involving members of the department was caught on tape and posted on the internet, which drew a great deal of attention. For those who want to see it, you can go to YouTube and search Omaha Police Use Excessive Force. Can you provide any updates regarding the video as far as the people that were arrested, the elderly woman in the wheelchair that was allegedly knocked over by one of the police officers, and Chief Schmader's response?
Well, Chief Schmader is, I believe, the 8th chief in a decade in Omaha. It's been a revolving door in that office. Number one, it's a problematic office, and number two, the chiefs are rewarded handsomely, not surprising, by a union contract that encourages them to leave early. So he is a fairly new chief, and he's promised reform, but we've heard that before. I mean, the Omaha Police Department is a very archaic police department, has made very few advancements or changes to its policing, so he was touted as, a modernizing chief of police. I'm reserving judgment. He did come in and promise to do an immediate review.
I'm sorry, before you continue, is he a member of the Omaha community, or is he from outside of the state?
Well, that's interesting you should say that. There was an opportunity to hire somebody who I thought was much more qualified from the outside, but this mayor, once again, hired inside, which has been the history of Omaha. So it is a problem. Most of the chiefs grew up in this department. They don't know other departments. And so even though Schmader has a criminal justice master's degree and promises these changes, much of what's happened is the power and the authority of the chief has been so eroded by the union and the union contract, it's difficult to really do much. Well, he has fired 4 officers. 3 that were at the scene. 1 was a sergeant, a command officer. There are also 4 more officers under investigation, and our county attorney and city attorney claim that they're reviewing this case for possible criminal action. It's been reported in the paper that this has been the largest firing or disciplinary action in the history of OPD. But I will tell you that the record for OPD, as far as discipline goes, no firing has been sustained unless there was an attendant criminal action. In other words, you cannot be fired, or at least your firing will not be sustained in this community for bad performance alone, which is, to me, a huge, huge problem. Obviously, a chief should be able to fire underperformers or poor performers. We recently had another video case, the Robert Wagner case, which is probably also on YouTube, that everybody can also look up and see, where 8, 10, 12 officers have Robert Wagner on the ground, tasing him, kicking him, stomping on his hand, what have you. 2 of those officers were fired by the previous chief, but were reinstated according to their arbitration.
On the day of the incident, you submitted a letter to Mayor Jim Shuttle and Chief Schmatter condemning them, the department, and previous administrations for their lackluster response to the alleged patterns of abuse, brutality, and corruption. Have they responded?
Not to me. They won't respond to me directly. I'm public enemy number 1, according to them. Schmatter promised to respond to the community, which he did with his firings. But I'm here, and we also have a nationally recognized expert here in Omaha, Sam Walker, Professor Sam Walker, and we are persona non gratis in this community when it comes to policing. They simply will not speak to us about our area of expertise, which is, I think, also indicative of their denial and their resistance to any sort of outside recommendations for change.
Has the letter or any of your reports been submitted to Governor Heinemann? And if so, what was his response?
No, we have not gone to the governor. We have considered going to the state auditor. The state auditor actually at one time came in at the bequest of someone on kind of on the periphery of our active group to investigate the fire union, which is equally corrupt, and in many ways even more so. And at that time, the auditor, state auditor, came in and said that the records were so bad he couldn't audit them, as though that were a reason not to do anything else. But, I mean, that in and of itself, you would think would provoke some state action, some attorney general action. But we haven't had any. It's just simply ignored.
An Omaha city official recently said the department would welcome an investigation by the Justice Department. Does that surprise you?
I've heard the department say that before. I hope they mean it, because that is absolutely our intention, is to get an investigation. But, you know, they've postured before. I don't think they believe it. Or what's even more terrifying to some extent is I don't think they understand the level of incompetence at that department.
What 3 incidents would you cite as irrefutable proof that the Justice Department needs to take a hard look at the Omaha Police Department?
Well, I think that the most persuasive in terms of evidence are all those that we actually have video for, but we have other cases that have not been captured on video that I actually think are more compelling. One was Justin Watson, who ended up as an in-custody death. I believe this police department sat on his back, beat him, and caused him to go into respiratory arrest. 10 days later, he died in the hospital. I think that's one of the most significant cases. But obviously, these 2 cases, the Robert Wagner case and the Johnson family case, because they are captured on video, but those are only in recent history. There are many, many more cases that we could present and have presented. We're on Chapter 3 of our filings. In fact, we're sending another filing to the Justice Department, updating them on more recent cases, including the Johnson case.
I was informed of a shooting that took place by the Omaha Police Department at a Walgreens, which many are calling questionable.
Yes.
What information do you have on that?
Well, we learn absolutely nothing. It's part of the problem. We have a weak and incompetent media, and it may be primarily, too, because the police department hides so much information. While it's common to hide or keep quiet during the course of an investigation, we never get any information, even after cases are released. They hide behind secrecy. They say that there's a grand jury investigation when there's an in-custody death, and so they never make anything after that public.
What actually took place? What led to the shooting? Do you have any idea?
Yes, allegedly there was a methamphetamine ring, but there's no information if they were actually conducting any sale or any criminal activity at the time. There was just a woman and a man who were spotted as suspects and apparently chased by vehicle into the parking lot of a very busy Midtown Walgreens. And about 10 o'clock on a Friday night, the driver of the vehicle claims that she was she was trying to drive away. She was being rammed by two other cars and several men with guns who got out of the cars. And in fact, they were unmarked gang units that are not dressed in uniforms. They did have guns drawn. She claimed she was trying to get away. Police claimed that she was trying to ram them. During the course of this, the man who is in the passenger seat reportedly reached for something in the floorboard, and an Omaha police officer fired 3 shots. However, the Omaha police officer was standing at the back of the vehicle and shot the man in the head. He died several days later. He was unarmed.
In closing, is there anything special that you'd like to say or anyone that you'd like to address regarding the situation in Omaha?
Yes. I mean, it is inconceivable to me that you wouldn't investigate. Why wouldn't you want a better police department? It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, other than some political, payoff or better positioning, there's just no reason to believe that you would not want to get to the bottom of these cases. I always say to people there's smart policing and not smart policing. The OPD is an example of not smart policing. We have a gun violence problem in Omaha, and part of the reason we have a gun violence program, I submit, is because we have a very poor police department. With better policing, I think we could reduce some of that crime. And then the other thing I would say, Gary, and the thing that really probably animates me the most, so I've been here for 12 years now. I can't tell you the number of decent people who have been so harmed and damaged by this police department. And it's just mystifying how or why it's allowed to continue. So we need help. We need help from somebody in this community or somebody outside the community who will come in and conduct a thorough and has the wherewithal to complete an investigation, make recommendations, and enforce those recommendations and those changes. And to me, that's the special litigation unit of the Justice Department.
And once again, for the record, Omaha Mayor Jim Suttle and Chief of Police Todd Schmatter were invited on the show to provide their assessment of the increasingly tense situation between the Omaha Police Department and the community. The officials did not respond. Once again, thank you very much for being here, Ms. Bonn.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And I thank all of you for joining me for another edition of the G-Man Interviews. Until next time, stay cool, stay safe, and stay informed.